All right, tonight we have Dr. James Gardner, and he is a paranormal researcher, paranormal author, and he's working on a book right now. Some of the things he's been investigating or researching paranormal stories in California, Hawaii, Mexico, New Orleans, soon Panama City, Panama, and Manhattan. Is that correct, there, James?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if you got in Alaska, but
Oh,
yeah,
Alaska. Okay,
yeah.
Alaska.
And
Okay,
I've done about a dozen cities and countries and parts of Europe as well.
okay. And I have to, well, and you also too, you did Julian Hotel, Clayton, I believe Vallejo too. I'm not
Yeah, I've
sure.
been California is so big. I ended up doing San Francisco separately, Los Angeles separately, Orange County, and some Northern California. So sometimes, as in California or Manhattan, I just look at small areas. Sometimes, like Alaska, I do a whole state. In Hawaii, I had to do the islands separately. It's just curiously enough, the proportion of ghosts or spirits to a population differs. Some places are very heavy with entities or supernatural occurrences. Some places are light. So sometimes you can cover a whole place with just one book. Sometimes, like Manhattan, just the island of Manhattan's got so many ghosts, takes a whole book just to cover Manhattan or New Orleans or San Francisco. So it just depends on what's there.
And how many books do you have published?
Well, I had, I'm going to say about 45, but I have about 12 in the ghosts. I do different things. I do American history. I do lost and mysterious places. I do ghosts. In the ghost category, I think I have about a dozen.
And you're headed for Panama City, Panama.
Yeah, that's my next place to go.
Okay, and I guess I'll be part of that book because you read one of my articles, and so it seems like you'll be placing some of that information into your book, I think.
Yeah, you had what I normally do. I go through a very extensive literature search, uh, and then I go somewhere and I check it out. Turns out about one third of the information I get online doesn't really pan out. About a third is perfectly accurate. About a third needs a little tweaking. So I like to go and follow up with visits before I actually publish the book. So I'll be going down to validate all the things that I've read. I've got about 50 or 60 ghosts. Well, when I say ghosts, sometimes it's ghost apparitions. Sometimes there's soldiers or there's workers. So, and there might be hundreds of people there. But I've got about 50 incidents, which may involve thousands of people with the ghosts and about a dozen spirits. And fortunately, I got a hold of your article because, quite frankly, they hadn't come up in my other research. And you'd be surprised for Panama, but for many places, there's not a single place you can go and get this information. You get a little piece here, a little piece there. This place, maybe you get 10. That place, maybe you get 5. I stumbled on yours. Very luckily, there'll be 4. I think you had 5 or 6, but 4 of them I had never heard of before. So that was real lucky for me.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. Um, Also, too, I have to ask you about Clayton. What did you find in Clayton? Because that's close to where I live at.
Oh, okay. Well, there was a Clayton was a funny place because up there there's a park, and that park has got it's like a historical park. They've taken buildings from San Francisco and from Northern California and brought them to this park. And some of them are fully functioning. They sell clothing, they're pizza places, bars. And in there were about three of them, maybe four, that had ghost backgrounds to them. So I went exploring the those four places to see if there was any current activity. People think that if there's a ghost and you move the place, the ghost stays where he was originally located, or the ghost moves with the place. It turns out it's both ways. Sometimes they stay no matter what you put there, and sometimes they move with you. And in this particular time, I was in a pizza parlor ordering a pizza. But when I go on these things, I talk to people who aren't involved. If I'm in a hotel, I'll talk to all kinds of people. Have you ever seen? What have you seen? Etc. So I was talking to the pizza people. Had they ever seen anything mysterious around there? And they hadn't seen anything, but they were new. But they had a cook, and he'd been there for many years. So they called the cook out. I asked the cook, have you seen anything mysterious? He said, yeah, he called it a ghost in the backyard where they had a lawn bowling area. And he says it's a girl with dark hair, and she's about 11 or 12 years old. And every time we go out there, she disappears. And there was nothing about this place, that was new to me. I thought, oh, I found a ghost that nobody knows about. I was pretty excited. And then I realized the place right across the street had been a bar in San Francisco in the turn of the century. And a little 11 or 12-year-old girl with dark hair had been run over right outside the bar. And she was
Wow.
haunting the bar. And now the bar has moved almost 100 years later, or 100 years later, someplace else. And these guys knew nothing about that story. And nobody in that place knew anything about that story. All they knew is this was a historic bar that had been moved here from San Francisco. But I had the story. So that was a remarkable, validation, if you will, of the story. I never saw her, but of his own volition, this cook is telling me about 11 or 12-year-old, small, dark-haired girl who's haunting his place, went right across the street. Should be, from the stories, the small, dark-haired 11 to 12-year-old girl. That was a big, I love it. It doesn't happen very often that I have an
I
account.
like that. I do the same thing. Let's say I'm investigating the Ione Hotel. I'll talk to some people who have actually stayed at the hotel just to see if they had any experiences and record it. So yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I know you get a lot of satisfaction from that.
Yeah, that's about altogether. I think I investigate about 10,000 stories. I threw away about 9,000 of them. I was left with about 1,000 of them, and most of those form the basis of all the books I've written. And I think I've followed up on about 150 of them of actually going there and seeing what people say and what the stories are, etc. I think of all those things, I probably only had two other experiences like that were validating it beyond just two or three people saying they saw something like that, but something that was like an external validation of the stories. So yeah, it's a big deal.
Now, with this new book that you have on Panama, what's the title going to be?
I was going to call it The Ghosts of Panama, but it turns out there's a best-selling novel of the same name, so I can't use that name, and it's going to be called Ghosts and Spirits of Panama.
Okay, okay. Yeah, and that's basically what I did was when I went to Panama City, Panama, I basically just talk to people on the street to find out what the ghost stories are and stuff like that. I see Zandine's here. Zandine, we have Dr. James Gardner. He's a paranormal author, paranormal researcher, and he's been all over the place. So, and he's working on a book about the ghosts of Panama City, Panama. Okay?
Actually,
So,
it's all of Panama. Most of the ghosts are in Panama City, but I'm covering the whole from Boca de Toro to Pedassi to Boquete. So there's ghosts all around, but most of them are in Panama City.
oh, okay, cool, cool. Okay. Um, I was gonna, okay, since you did some stories from Clayton, California, um, and you said you also too did something in Vallejo.
No, Vallejo. No, I'm not familiar with Vallejo.
Okay, well, Vallejo's right next to Clayton, and um, and this is something that might pique your interest. They had an orphanage over there. It's called the Good Servant Orphanage, and later on it was called the Good Serpent Orphanage. And they did all kinds of terrible things over there. And this
Yeah.
is back in the 1800s, but they had these disabled children, and they did the lobotomies. They used to inject air into their spine, slapping, hitting, waterboarding, needles under the fingernails, plucking eyes out, skinning them alive, their vital organs taken out with no anesthesia, sleep deprivation, child sex molestation, shock treatment on the temple and organs. Um, I did something like 7 investigations of homes that were built near this orphanage. The
Oh,
orphanage was completely destroyed. The Vallejo city government doesn't like talking about it because it was very bad history. Um, and also, too, the Bohemian Grove, which is nearby, endorsed it when it was first built, and they called it Hope on the Hill. And they
mhm.
have, and as you know, the Bohemian Grove, they have an owl effigy, and they would sacrifice a plastic doll into that effigy. So I was wondering if any of the missing children from the orphanage were sacrificed at the Bohemian Grove.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something. And also, too, with Vallejo, you also, too, have Lake Berryessa, where that couple were terrorized by the San Francisco Zodiac. And he
Mm.
killed, well, he tied them both up and he killed the woman and he stabbed the boyfriend. So you have Lake Berryessa, the orphanage. Oh, and then you have Mare Island, which is very haunted with lots of ghosts. So if you're interested and you go back to Clayton, Vallejo's right next door, and you have all that going on.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. There's I, I in one of my books on Mexico, there's a similar situation, and in Hawaii, there's a similar situation of orphanages that were used in the same way. Just terrible things happen to the kids there, and to this day, the place in Mexico, I don't remember the name, and the one in Hawaii was called for Wayward Boys, and it was on the north side where the surfing goes. But those orphanages were terrible places. Down,
Oh, what did you do in Alaska?
uh, Alaska is funny. Actually, they're all funny because studying, researching spirits or ghosts or entities or supernatural, whatever you want to call it, it's I didn't start out doing that on purpose. But in doing that, what I find is it's a bit like cultural anthropology. The stories of the spirits are telling you as much about the place as it is about the spirits. In other words, you talk about Alaska. So the ghosts that you find in Alaska are so different from the ghosts of Mexico or the ghosts of Hawaii or the ghosts of New Orleans or the ghosts of any place else. Alaska has got, for example, you find more business owners, hotel operators, and interestingly enough, prostitutes. The only other place that's got as many ghost prostitutes is New Orleans. And again, New Orleans, because New Orleans had a lot of prostitutes, and Alaska, because there were so many men, had a lot of prostitutes in a lot of hotels. So, in the so when you're studying ghosts, you inevitably get caught up in the culture of the place. Lots of suicides in Alaska, whereas suicides they happen, but not in such great numbers as they do up there in Alaska. Um, in Alaska, the not so many kid ghosts, whereas elsewhere you find kid ghosts. Um, so it's yeah, each place tells its story, but its spirits are so much a reflection of the place itself. It's just really interesting. I found Alaska more sad than anything else because the stories are so sad. People go up there and they get lost and they freeze to death. Um, the women are waiting for them to come back, and inevitably the women have to turn to prostitution because they have no money left and they kill themselves. Um, yeah, the stories in Alaska and what leads somebody to becoming a ghost are maybe amongst the saddest stories of them all. And they're not particularly nasty ghosts. Mexico's got evil ghosts. Panama has got ghosts that are really up to murder. Hawaii's got some nasty ghosts. Alaska, they're not really nasty. They're just sad. It's the stories are sad.
Well, what do you think about the Alaskan Triangle, where you have something like since 1972, 100,000 people missing? What the heck? And something about a black pyramid that's buried in Alaska. Have you looked into that?
I don't know the Black period. I know that they go missing. Uh, well, they have two kinds of problems there. The one is just missing in general, and then there are all the natives who go missing. And the natives who go missing, people tend to think that that's more like a slave trade. And there are several ghosts related to that native being abducted slave trade thing. The other part of Alaska is, there's only a couple of cities, and some of them
Great.
to get from one to the other is so difficult. I can imagine people uh, going missing just because it's so difficult to get from one place to another. They have in that highway, there are several ghost stories along the highway in Alaska, and of course, ghost stories. There are highway ghost stories in Mexico, in Hawaii, in Panama, even in going back to the American Revolution in Pennsylvania. So ghost stories along highways are not at all uncommon, but they're very different. In Alaska, they die trying to get from one place to another on the highways. In most of the other places, it's a hitchhiker who gets killed by somebody. Um, and they're looking for their revenge or to try to find the people who killed them. So the ghost by a highway is pretty common in many places, but the whole story around it's very different depending upon the place. Nobody would hitchhike in Alaska. It's too goddamn cold. Nobody's going to hitchhike. But they are going to die, and nobody's going to die of the weather in Mexico, but they are going to hitchhike.
I know Zandine's probably got some things he wants to ask you, so I'm gonna let Zandine take it. Zandine?
I'm just wondering what was there any particular reason that had drawn you to Panama City? Or was just the activity and you figured that that's the best place to start?
Well, I had I had done a book on Mexican Riviera, the ghosts in the Mexican Riviera, and
Okay.
I'm revising that now with a guy who's a specialist down there in the ghosts of um, Puerto Vallarta. And I had noticed that the ghost stories in Mexico and in Hawaii, they were different um, than the ghost stories in Manhattan, New Orleans, San Francisco, Los Angeles, London, Germany. They had a different taste to them. They're far more evil, far more violent, um, far more spirit. And particularly when I was working on Mexico, I did a lot of research on the people of Mexico, the indigenous people who then gave birth to these ghost stories. And I found a big overlap between the indigenous culture pre the Spanish invasion and the kind of ghost stories they came up with. So I was looking to see whether or not this was a trend or if this was just peculiar to Mexico and Hawaii. Hawaii had the American invasion, Mexico had the Spanish invasion. And then I was looking for a place to go, and Panama just seemed like a great place to go. And it had a lot of ghosts. It ended up having about over a dozen spirits, which was funny because most places just have ghosts, but Panama has a big load of spirits, as does Mexico, and about 60 ghosts or so. So you're right, it was a fertile ground, but it was originally my thought, what happens to an indigenous culture that gets taken over so badly as the Hawaiians from the Americans and the Mexicans? Spanish? Does that impact the ghosts? So I wanted another shot at that, and that's what Panama City gave me.
Sure.
Thank you for that.
And now, have you been overseas a lot?
Well, I used to live overseas, uh, and but yeah, I've been London, Europe, Asia,
Asia.
What part of Asia?
Australia,
What part of Asia did you go to?
Japan, and I spent most of the time in Japan. I, I popped over to Hong Kong, and I was in Thailand, and I think that's it in Asia. Yeah, the Hawaiian, a lot of the flavor of the Hawaiian spirits comes from the Japanese and their ghosts. So I wanted to see if the way the ghosts were appearing in Hawaii, how much of them came from their Japanese roots. And it turns out, yeah, there are some, but the Japanese um, culture, although it's very alive in Hawaii, does not really permeate the Hawaiian culture as much as the Hawaiian culture, or the Pacific, that's the wrong word, Pacific Islander culture is very much a part of the Hawaiian stories mingled with the American culture. The Japanese influence is there, but it's really much less than I expected it to be. And maybe Pearl Harbor is the reason for that. I don't know. But
You
somehow,
know, there's a lot of ghosts out. When I went to Hawaii, I went to the USS Arizona.
oh, yeah, sure.
They said, yeah, there's a lot of ghosts on that
Yeah.
memorial.
And the Air Force Base and the airport. There's quite a concentration of
Oh
They say
yeah.
a lot of soldier ghosts in Hawaii too.
Oh yeah.
Do you
Oh
say in
yeah.
even the Pacific Islanders, miss most of them are just like they're based on Japanese originally as well too. Okay, that's interesting.
Yes, some of it, although it Hawaiian is mostly Pacific Islander with some Japanese thrown in there every so often, but it doesn't blend. In other words, the Japanese spirits in Hawaii pretty much look like the Japanese spirits in Japan.
Okay.
Um, so they didn't, whereas the American and Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, they seem to have blended a lot more than the Japanese. So the Japanese are there, not a lot of them, but a few of them. The most outstanding one that I recall is the choking ghost from Japan. Is
Oh
pretty
yeah.
much the choking ghost in Hawaii. That story is pretty much the same. And there's a choking ghost in Panama too. I don't know.
Ah,
There's not a lot
And,
of choking ghosts.
and you got the Minahuni in Hawaii.
Oh, I love the Minnehoodies. Yeah.
Yeah.
I, when I the last couple of times, I track down all their places and I go follow the mini hoodie. Yeah.
do you think this is the evil spirit that's embodied and manifesting in all these different cultures and areas, or do you think it's just good storytelling being transferred and handed down for like moral purposes and embellishment? What?
Oh, I think you're right. Most of the stories, whether they're evil or not, really serve as moral lessons. They're a folklore way of saying, don't go out at night, don't mess around with strangers, don't be lustful. I think almost all of them end up having a moral lesson, whether
Okay.
they're evil or not. But the evil ones, there's not a lot of evil ghosts in Manhattan. There's not a lot of evil ghosts in New Orleans or
I
San
see what you mean.
Francisco. So
Okay.
they really show up more in Hawaii, Mexico, and Panama. And I think that is, I'm still struggling with this, but I'm beginning to think because they were invaded and their lives were so awful and violence was such an everyday part of their life. I think somehow the anticipation of evil got built into their cultures more so than it did into American culture or English culture. Uh, which isn't to say we don't have a lot of violence in America. We got a lot of violence in London too. But that outside the Spanish shit, with Mexico and Panama, and that was, and then it continued. It's not like they were there doing terrible stuff for centuries. So it wasn't a
Okay.
simple
Yeah.
thing. So
I see what you mean.
I think that's what turned those stories more towards evil than you get. The French came into New Orleans, the French left New Orleans, the Spanish were there, but it wasn't the terrible stuff that these other people suffered. I'm beginning to think that that's what's going on with the evil spirits. But I think, just as you hit it on the head, whether it's an evil spirit or a good spirit, they're all trying to say this is the way you should live. These are our principles of life.
When I was in Hong Kong and when I went to, well, I've been to Tokyo, Japan, and I've been to Bangkok, Thailand,
The life then.
and they talked about hungry ghosts.
Yeah, the hungry ghosts.
Yeah, did you experience that, James?
Yeah,
The hungry ghosts?
the hungry ghosts. Well, they're in Panama too. The weeping women. Part of the story of the weeping women often involves being hungry as well. And some of them they just do the weeping part. Some of them do the hungry part. Um, so yeah, and I think you don't get a lot of hungry ghosts in New Orleans or in Manhattan,
Yeah.
you know. But you get them in places where people were really hungry. because they were being starved because they were slaves. They were put, they under terrible conditions, and so I think that's why.
That's me in Palawa Island
Oh,
in Thailand.
yeah, they have Thailand. Did you get the stories of those giant ghosts they have in Thailand?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they
They
have
they got one ghost after another.
that Thailand. Thailand
Yeah,
has
they
a
got
lot.
thousands of different ghosts over there. Just tell me about New Orleans. That's another place full of ghosts.
Yeah, New Orleans. I think I don't have my books in front of me, so I'm speculating. But I think New Orleans had the most ghosts per square mile of any other place I investigated. I'm the My background was clinical psychology, so I did a lot of research. So when I'm doing this stuff, I create spreadsheets, and I have spreadsheets on all the places I go. So I have the ratios and the percentages, et cetera, and I know how many ghosts there are per square mile or per person. I have all this data that I collect. Uh, as a scientist, rather than just the stories. The stories are important. Stories are vital, but then I like to look at what the data suggests. I'm pretty sure if it's not Manhattan, it is New Orleans that's got the number one ghost per square uh, mile, and that's because New Orleans, Manhattan's got more ghosts, but Manhattan is bigger. New Orleans is just maybe 5 square blocks or something like that, 6 or 7 square blocks, where all these ghosts are congregated. Uh, lots of um, Lots of prostitutes of all kinds, lots of military people, a couple of writers, Faulkner, Hemingway, a couple of generals, and uh, a couple of wacko dentists and physicians who did terrible things. Um, a lot of lust and some interracial ghosts. Um, it's got it's got a pretty it's got a broad collection of ghosts on most respects, and that's because it's a pretty broad place. There were so many cultures there, and it was a transit. It still is a transit place where people come in and out. So whereas in Manhattan, you get a lot of, I think 50% of the Manhattan ghosts are in the entertainment industry. 50% of the LA ghosts are entertainment. San Francisco ghosts are in real estate. You get these kinds of collections, but a place like New Orleans gives you a really broad spectrum ghost because the city itself was so broad spectrum. That's what I mean about the culture helping shape the um, the ghosts that are there. Yeah, New Orleans is uh, it's not depressing though. It's got some cruel. They're not evil like evil in Mexico and in Panama. The devil shows up. I mean, it's such evil shit. It's the devil. It's not just somebody who did something bad. It's the damn devil doing shit. Whereas there are some bad people who do some bad things in New Orleans, but it's not devil stuff. So yeah, really, actually, they're all interesting. They're all
James, I'm going to take you back to Japan. Why do you think people gravitate towards suicide forests to commit suicide?
I think you just answered the question with the question. If it's a suicide, there's a place I forget where it is. There's a place in Hawaii. It's called Suicide Rock. When people want to commit suicide, it's like that's where they go.
We got a place right over here in Auburn, California called Suicide Bridge. And it's a very high bridge, and a lot of suicides have happened there.
Yeah, there's a place it's Maryland or I forget. It's on the East Coast, and it's a bridge where people put a bracelet on the bridge and then they jump off it.
Oh my
And
God.
the bridge is filled with those bracelets, And sure enough, there's lots of ghosts there, and it's all sad story. So I think, yeah, if you ad if you advertise, uh, then they
So,
will come.
doctor, like you said, I was gonna. That was interesting what you said about the culture being like what happens in the the place of the type of ghost. But like you said, I heard a sniper mention that very thing. He was saying that he was seeing a lot of ghosts from the war, like where he was. But this was the newer one of the Afghanistan war.
Uh,
There was a sniper saying that that's what he was seeing there. He didn't relate it to culture or anything, but those are the things. That's all he was seeing there. So I thought it was interesting when you said that because he didn't mention seeing like a lawyer or an actor or an actor, nothing like that. Just the victims and the people. So that's interesting. And I was going to ask you when they say ghost, what is do you believe that's like psychosomatic? Do you believe what's compelling to you as a doctor, somebody that's researched it and looks at it like practically, what's something that moves you and says, hey, I really don't know.
when when I do the research, um, and I was saying before, I've looked at maybe 10,000 stories, and I ended up with 1,000 that were reasonable. They told a story. One of the things I look for is that the story is congruent with the time period and with the culture that it's in. And the other thing I'm looking for is usually multiple attestations. In other words, over here somebody tells a story, and 5 years later somebody else is telling a story, and 10 years later. So it's not a single story, but multiple incidences. And I like to see some consistency, but I don't want it to be too consistent. If it's too consistent, then I think it's made up. So, it could be
Okay.
somebody says it was a young boy and somebody says it was a young girl. That's okay with me. If they said it was a young girl and an old man, I'd start getting worried. But if it's a young girl and a young boy, or an old girl, or old woman, an old man, then I'm looking for consistency. But I'm not looking for 100% because that sounds funny. And then I'm always looking for external evidence. So in Hawaii, there's a curve um, where there's a ghost of a woman who was killed in a house, and they say she haunts that curve, and people have accidents. So when I get a story like that, I go back to the newspapers and I look to see if there are stories of accidents on that curve. Or they say the people were murdered in this house, and so I go, did murders ever happen? I like to get empirical evidence. Um, so
Okay.
they don't have to. I'm going to say 9,000 out of 10,000 of the ones I looked at seems to me to be somebody was either making it up or having a hallucination or a bad drug trip. But 1,000 of them seemed as if, yeah, there's something here that's more than just somebody's hallucination or somebody's. Sometimes people make up stories just for the attention. And sometimes they're doing it for business, I think. There's a very famous restaurant in Los Angeles. I won't
Yeah.
mention it because they could sue me. But they say Charlie Chaplin's ghost sits in the table by the uh, by the window.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
if you want to sit there, you've got to pay a little extra. So
Okay,
you,
okay.
you wonder, is his ghost really there? Or when the hotel advertises the most haunted hotel in San Diego, come book your room, you got to wonder, is that real or just people trying to take advantage? So I, I try to put on my science hat and be skeptical and make it prove itself to me.
Ah,
That's like the whaling house in San Diego.
Oh, yeah.
They want the tourists.
Well, yeah, they want the tourists, but there's a lot of now that's an example of a place where there's a lot of empirical evidence that they were real people. They died the way they died. Um, so that's a story that's not that, they were real people. They died kind of the way they died. It is tragic. Um, there's another guy. Do you know the story of the guy? What the hell is his name? His name is Jim, but it's some kind of Jim who was killed on that spot on the way where they built the Whaley House. He was killed
Oh
before
yeah,
that.
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
California Jim or something like that, or Golden Jim or
yeah. When I went there,
Yankee
yeah, it
Jim.
was something
Yankee
Jim.
Jim is his name. And so he was hung in that place, and there are records of him being hung in that place. Um, and then they built the house, and then the people experienced his ghost, but in fact, he was really hung in that place. And then I read his trial, and in fact, that poor guy was really, he was hung. He went for a joyride on a boat, and he returned the boat. He really, and they hung him for that. So, if anybody had a reason to stay behind and argue his case, he certainly did. So that's a good example of, they are making money on it, but it does seem to have a rich background of the stuff they say happened to him even before they were there, seem to have really happened for real.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, that's one. Now those people, I'm not sure the Whaley people make a lot of money, but you can have 2 or 3 different ghost tours down there, and they're making money off the tours.
And like Doctor, when I went to the Whaley House, yeah, they were all excited because I was writing an article about it. So they were like very enthusiastic in telling me about the ghosts. Yeah, and I think the ghost that you're referring to is Big Jim, but I'm not sure.
No, it's Yankee Jim. I remember it's Yankee Jim,
Yankee Jim, that's right,
Yankee Jim,
Yankee Jim.
and I can't remember maybe it's Yankee Jim Robinson. I'm not sure I remember his last name. He was a character who used to be up in the gold rush up in Northern California. And he got in trouble because he was a scamp and he had to escape from there and come down south to San Diego where he was a scamp. But, he just didn't deserve to be hung
Yeah.
the way they hung him.
Doctor, do you I know you do ghosts, but do you do the cryptids, UFOs, any of those things?
No, I'm so busy. I have a series on American history, one on lost and mysterious places, one on politics, and I don't know. Yeah, I barely have time to finish one book when I'm not working on another book.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, there's only so much. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
lots of stuff I'm interested in doing. And you were talking about those Vallejo. There are a whole bunch of places up in Northern California. While you were talking, I was remembering that's on my list of things to do. And I just haven't gotten the time to be able to do them.
Paranormal, you have a paranormal bucket list.
Yeah, I think you would find the Valley area interesting, not, for the computer stuff, obviously, but for I think it's pretty loaded. I stayed in that area for a while, and it's a lot going on there.
I'll,
Yeah.
I'll bet there is. I know I did San Francisco, and there was a lot in San Francisco, and there was all kinds of stuff. That's why I got interested in the Northern California and the Silicon Valley and the Southern California areas too. And again, as you say, a
Yeah,
bucket list.
San Francisco. I grew up there, so I can relate. It is actually, you know what? I don't even know why I talked about San Jose. San Francisco, you could, some of the Victorians we stayed in when I was a kid, if you looked in the closet, you could, I mean, it was nothing, but you could imagine, like, you would just feel like, you just feel like there's something. But then later on, you hear, there's a house by Jackson. Well, we call it Jackson Park, but this park is right off of Fillmore Street, and it's like it's built into, it's a divider between Victorians on both sides, but it's a park everybody goes into, like in the middle of the city. But that area right there, there's a house that's, I really didn't know that it was haunted, like until, you know, people started on the show started talking about it, but we always talked about, hey, these places like something's going on here. It
What's the
just
name of the mansion, Zandy?
I don't know the exact name. I just know it's right off. It's like it's one block off of Fillmore, and
Isn't it a mansion?
it is a mansion.
Is it the
Yeah.
one
I
that's
mean,
Okay.
divided in
I
half?
I I know what you're talking about.
it's what I'm
Um,
talking about.
yeah, yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
plays
yeah.
frisbee right there, huh? Yeah, because I lived in Leslie Apartments, which is right down the street from it. It's
Okay,
like
my employee, Melanie Huter, actually knows the owner of that mansion, and she got to spend like 2 nights over there. And they did a TV show, Ghost Adventures. Did it? Yeah, they were there because they were invited by the owner. I know exactly what you're talking about, but I can't think of the name of it right now.
Is that the
yeah.
one that's divided in half and they live on each side of that half?
I don't know. I think you know what? When that might be another one because I was referring to there's a giant park that divides um unlike a regular street, this is just a wide park and everybody plays in it. But it normally
Oh,
everything
yeah, the woman who she built that park about
okay.
in the early 1900s. She built that park. She lived across the street in a mansion. She was very rich, and she was a black woman, and
Okay. Okay. I didn't know
she
that.
she had an affair with a white guy who a very rich white guy, but she was rich herself, and they when the guy died, his relatives wanted to ruin her life, which they did, and they called her a voodoo princess and said she controlled him by the voodoo, and
Yeah, yeah.
she died, but her spirit stays in that park, and there's all kinds of things about the birds. I wish yes, I know that park and I know that story.
Okay, yeah, 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 you do, yeah, because
She was called the Voodoo Queen of San Francisco, and which she wasn't really, but that's what these relatives of the guy she was
right,
having an affair with, they were in love. But in those days, a black woman and a white man, that was scandalous.
right.
Um,
Now,
yeah, lots of stuff. Chinatown in San Francisco is filled with all kinds of ghosts. Um, yeah, San Francisco is a very the they used to have cemeteries in San Francisco, and
right. Coma and Daly City, all those, the South San Francisco, and they moved a lot of that stuff there, and so a
well,
lot of people
they
don't know
took them
that.
out and they moved
Yeah,
them across the bay, and then they built places on top of that. So all those ghosts, they're still there. Yeah, San Francisco is. I did a whole book on it, and they have the Chinatown ghosts, the cemetery ghosts, and they have a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of famous business
ah,
people and their wives. And they also have writers up there. San Francisco is a very interesting,
mm.
and San Francisco is one of it's got cop ghosts. Very few cities have cop ghosts.
And
It's got a ghost.
my mom was one. My dad is he's still alive, but my mother was a SFPD too as well for 35 years. So you right about that.
Did she talk about the ghost? There's one on the Oakland Bay Bridge, and one on the Golden Gate Bridge, and one in Golden Gate Park. The guy in Golden Gate Park stops you from the speeding, and I forget the one in the I forget, but it's one of the few places that there are police ghosts, and they have three of them in that city. So yeah, San Francisco is just
Well, I grew up in San Bruno, but when I was a
Ah,
child, my dad was a tax investigator, so I lived all over California, Fresno, Monterey, Visalia, Stockton, but I
oh,
spent most of my time in San Bruno. And oh yeah, yeah. And then Daly City Cemetery.
man.
I Yeah, we used to go over there because I was interested in the paranormal. But some of my high school friends, and Willie Reed, if you're watching this, you know who I'm talking about. But some of my high school friends were grave robbers, and they because the Chinese would throw their jewelry and money
Uh,
into the graves, and they were seeing blue orbs flying around Daly City Cemetery, Chinese cemetery. And one of the stories that kind of blew me away is they said that this couple went up there to like Lover's Lane. They were parked there making out and stuff like that. And they saw like a UFO that landed over there. And as they were leaving, on top of the gate was a hairy creature, something like a Bigfoot, that jumped on their car. And people swear up and down this actually happened, but I don't know. But the my grave robbing friends, uh, when they saw the blue orbs and stuff like that, they said that the ghosts actually followed them to their house and they stopped grave robbing because the ghosts were terrorizing them at their house. Have you ever,
Ooh.
Sandine, did you ever go to the Daly City Chinese Cemetery?
Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, I feel some of it because it's more for like how opulent, how vast it is too. It's very big. They have big tombs, mausoleums, and like it has hills that you can go over, and you can see it from the other cemeteries. You don't actually have to go in that cemetery to realize how big it is. Yeah, but I've actually filmed it with a zone camera. So, and as a kid, we used to go up there, but I've never got, ironically, I've gone up there by myself to get EVPs, and I've never gotten anything from there. As much as I mean, I thought I would, but I didn't. And I have friends and relatives that are buried out there at Cypress Lawns, and um, it's like two or three cemeteries. Like all, most. If you're from San Francisco, you've got a relative out there. But the Asian cemetery, I've been there. It's really big. I mean, like it's one of the bigger ones there.
Well, you went with me to the Oakland Cemetery,
I
and
did.
that's
It's
where the
bigger than
black
that.
doctor, the Black Dahlia is buried there, along with
oh,
the
in
Guyana.
Oakland?
Yes, in Oakland. She's buried in Oakland. The Black Dahlia. What's her name? Elizabeth Short. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Elizabeth Short.
Yeah, we
And
went there. That's right.
and the victims of Reverend Jim Jones, Guyana. The victims are buried there, along with Hell's Angels. They're buried there.
Hmm.
The Oakland Hell's Angels.
Why did she go up to Oakland? Was that where she came from?
Yeah, that's where she came from. Yeah.
We got EVPs there too.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Shit, we got stuff there.
Yeah,
Oh,
she's
yeah.
an LA ghost.
Yeah.
You know,
And
it's
the
really
way
interesting.
Black Dahlia was killed, it was horrible. I mean,
Yeah,
they cut her in half. Oh my God.
it's interesting. There are some ghosts that travel and they're seen all over the place, and then there are other ghosts that seem to be tied to a single place.
It's
Well,
interesting.
yeah, Marilyn Monroe, for example, she's seen in many places. All of those are places she was. Like she's seen in San Diego, where she made Some Like It Hot at the Hotel Coronado, and they see her there. She's seen in LA. She's seen in New York, where she lived with the author and things like that. So she seems to get around a lot. Other ghosts are, never get around. It's just interesting why some ghosts move and some don't.
Well, the Roman Emperor Caligula was seen in all these different spots. And the theory is on that is that, okay, if you have, okay, like me being alive, um, let's say this stapler here, I'm very attached to. So my
Uh,
energy is around that stapler. So if I left that stapler at my grandma's house, I now have the capability of haunting this house and my grandmother's house because she has a stapler that I'm very attached to. So that's the theory on that. So they left things that they were attached to at different locations, like Adolf Hitler. his ghost was seen all over Germany, and I think it was seen over in France and stuff like that, because I guess he left things that his energy was attached to.
There's a city in the middle of California, uh, and they have a an antique place, and the basement is filled with all kinds of antiques that have, but they have lots of ghost activity there for exactly that reason, because these were all things that were very important to people. And I went there. I forget the name of the city. What's the big city in the middle of California? Right on the
Fresno,
five.
Fresno,
No, not Fresno.
um, Bakersfield.
Bakersfield. Yeah, Bakersfield. It's right outside Bakersfield. So I went there and to investigate and to go down, and they wouldn't let me in the basement. They said, "No, you can't go in there. There's too much shit going on here. You can't go in there." So I never got a chance to go inside. But they say lots of
Wow.
activity, which is the idea of attachment to objects down there.
Well, it's a very either.
So where do you draw the line when, people say, like you said, ghosts appear in certain places? Where do you draw the line between somebody, a chemical reaction, or actually thinking they saw it? I mean, versus like, when somebody really saw something, or like, I mean, do you even think that's happening?
Well, if there's one person, I'm going to say about 5,000 of the stories I threw away is somebody saying I was I'm just reading a book actually about somebody giving us ghosts in Panama, and he says uh, I'm walking down the street and I see a ghost, and the ghost is very terrifying, and I run home. Yeah, well, okay. How do we know that's drugs, alcohol, etc.?
Okay.
If you're walking down Main Street at midnight and you see a woman dressed in white and she floats through the air, yeah. But somebody, 5 years before that on that street saw it. And the history is that there was a woman raped and killed on that street 20 years ago.
Okay.
And before that, nobody saw the woman in white. Today, every 3 or 4 years, there's a woman in white. So, a single story,
Yeah.
I don't know if they're making it up or it's drugs,
Okay.
hallucinations, or etc. So I'm always looking for how many times has the story been told? Does it make sense? Is there something that we can tie this to? Was there a woman at a bus stop who did get raped and killed? And is there a house? And when you go digging, a lot of times you find, yeah, there was a house where people were murdered and all this terrible stuff happened. So yeah, I like to. I mean, you don't have to get everything doesn't have to be lined up for it to be true.
Yeah.
In life, everything isn't always lined up. But I like to get as much as possible where, yeah, many people have seen this. Yeah, there is some kind of factual basis. Yeah, it makes sense at the time that people did that. If somebody says, "Oh, I saw a ghost, he's carrying a sword," and yeah, well, unless it's in the Revolution or in a funny part of New York City,
Yeah,
somebody carrying a sword in LA, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So, or
I see what you mean.
it's a guy, it's the revolutionary. There's a church down in the lower part of Manhattan that's got a lot of revolutionary people buried in it. If you see a ghost there with a gun, there's no guns in the American Revolution. So I'm always trying to find something that tells me this is not a real story.
Okay.
I dropped 9,000 out of the 10,000 had something in it that raised a red flag that says, "Nah, this is not true." But some of them are true, and sometimes, as with the little girl with the black hair, sometimes I come upon something that was remarkable. I took my wife to San Diego to look at a hotel where there was a famous ghost outside of San Diego. and we got the chance to sleep in his room, and people said he moved furniture, he smoked a cigar, there were strange noises, and he grabbed people's feet. Those were his signs. But my wife didn't know any of that. We're just there
Okay.
having a good time. She'll go anywhere for a good time. She doesn't. She goes with me on these trips, but she doesn't care about the ghosts. So she doesn't know
Yeah.
what's going on. So in the morning, I wake up and I say, "Well, anything funny happen?" That's what I always do. What did you see? Is there anything funny? She says, "No, nothing funny. Did you feel anything? No. Did you smell anything? No. Did you hear anything? No. Did anything move? No. So nothing happened. No. Okay, that's 9 out of 10 times. That's what happened." And then she says, "Oh," she says, "Well, when you got up and you grabbed my toe, yeah, that I felt, but nothing else." I said, "Number one, I didn't grab your toe because I didn't get up. And number two, that's one of the four things people say this guy does."
Wow.
So,
Okay.
spooky.
Okay.
She didn't know
Okay.
that. She had no idea. Oh, and so
Mm.
every so often something funny like that happens that says, okay, this is maybe, I don't know, something that's really true there.
I
Well,
see what you mean.
yeah.
Doctor, do you believe that animals have souls?
Yeah, sure. My sweet dogs, my cat. Sure, I think of animals as part of the family. There are some cultures that have animal ghosts. We don't generally, we the European American don't have a lot of animal ghosts. There's a one or two in Hawaii, one or two in Panama. Panama has got dog ghosts. A good a good dog ghost and a bad dog ghost. And it's got spirits who turn into animals. Um, we don't have a lot of animal spirits, but yeah, I believe animals have souls. That they're not people, but they think, they have language, they do everything we do. They do it differently. So why wouldn't they have souls if they're just you know like us?
Yeah, I believe that they do have souls. One of the strangest calls that I have what is called a paranormal hotline, and so I get calls from some very strange stories. One story that I got, it was out of Kansas, where these people lived on a farm, but they had like a little tavern, and people would stop by and have drinks and stuff like that. And one of the things that they sold was barbecue chicken, and and they had a lot of cats, so people would throw the chicken bones out to the cats.
Oh, no.
And there's been people that went to this tavern that claim that they've seen ghostly chickens.
Complaining.
Yeah, so I mean, and I do believe animals have souls. So I mean, I've thrown sometimes chicken bones out in my backyard, but I haven't seen any ghostly chickens. But I have seen some of my dogs who passed away. I've seen them. I've seen their spirits, so around the house and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's kind of interesting because a lot of people eat chicken, a lot of people eat steak. So the bones, whatever they do with the bones, how come there's not really a ghostly cow that walks through the restaurant or whatever, you know? So I
There is
don't know.
on the East Coast, there are a couple of ghostly horses. One of them from the Revolution, at least one of them from the Revolution, and there are occasional ghost animals, but it's pretty rare. Well, because a lot of people don't think animals have souls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Like you
animals
said,
are. Oh, I'm sorry, Zandy.
oh, no, 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 I'm sorry.
No, no, no. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Now I was just gonna say that, like with animals, if you take for instance cats or dogs, if whatever you've had, if you remember having one, his personality, and then he passed or she passed, and then you get another animal, the similar one, and they have a totally different personality. They might look the same. You might even like them and get a good feeling, but you know the difference in like that essence or whatever it is, and how they listen to your commands or want to eat or go outside or get petted, whatever it is. So the soul has to be there because the communication is there. We just speak a different language, but other than that, you could see there's something's going on there with them, like it is us. I would think. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree completely.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Russian scientists have taken pictures of plants and the leaves, and there's like this energy field
Yeah,
around the leaf. So
Oh, wow.
even plants
Yeah.
seem like they have souls. Yeah, so yeah, I
Well, I guess
definitely believe animals have souls.
with that quantum entanglement and everything being related, it's like if they can theorize that a nuclear blast, affects things, or I mean, why wouldn't emotions, different things. I was listening to something about Tesla the other day when he was talking about he thought the emotions of fear, sadness, hate, those are frequencies that could be isolated and take away possibly. Like he said, it should happen in the future. I mean, it was just an idea, but I thought, wow, and he was actually picking out the different emotions that affect people. As
yeah.
a
There's a film called Wild Robot. Did you see it?
No, I
It's
didn't.
it's a kid film, and it's a robot somehow gets lost in the forest. So there's no people around, but he's a very bright robot, and he learns how to communicate with life in the forest. So it's the
Okay.
same kind of thing. They all have souls and beings, and they all cognitive. It's just we don't understand it when a leaf is turning and what it means, or he's trying to tell you, give me water or stop giving me water, but we're too stupid to understand.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this robot apparently learns how to communicate with the things in the forest. So I agree with you. We're all related. We just don't speak their language or understand them. They try to communicate with us, but I mean, sometimes we understand what they do. They say a dog can learn like 200 words,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like functions at the level of a 2-year-old.
That's, I
But
mean,
that's a dog is a human. We probably a pretty stupid dog if you say, how can the dog understand us? But a dog is pretty good
but
communicating with us. And
Yeah, and that's true. I heard the same thing. Yeah, dogs, they can learn about 200 words and understand you. And my dogs, they understand me. Yeah.
and they
I mean, if I
understand
say you want to walk, they're excited. They're ready. So,
yeah,
yeah.
and no, it's really amazing. Actually, I think animals teach us a little bit more about sign and communication because it can't all just be body language and eye language. But I know cats, so they have more recently more experience. I have one that can open the door. He does the handle, and I have one that fetches. And so, like when they come to, if they want to go outside, it's if it's they want something to eat, they just look at you, you know. And like if they want to go outside, they'll go by the door and they'll just sit by and like look up at you. But like instantly after years, like okay, so it's and I just keep getting amazed every day how um it's just another language, but like they're right there, and I'm like, when are we gonna bridge the gap? When is it gonna be like? I heard there's gonna be a translator coming if there's not one, but I mean like a real translator.
yeah, that's what this wild robot is. It's make believe, but that's what
Okay, I gotta see that.
they're trying to. It's a kids movie, but it's got some pertinent human
Ah,
interaction.
okay. I see
But
what you
watch
mean.
out when the cat is hungry and he's looking at you. Maybe you're the meal with the cat.
I'll check that next time. I'll make sure. I have to make sure I got food and
Cats are always a little bit wild. They're not like dogs. Dogs are completely domesticated, but a cat never really 100% domesticated.
Wow. Yeah, I gotta think. It gave me something to think about. I make sure I always have food with me. Then.
But it's what they say. If you die and you have a dog, the
Yeah.
dog will sit there with you. If you die and you have a cat, eventually the cat will get hungry and it'll start eating you. I've heard that said
I
from,
have. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, from police, who go in and you find the dog will just die next to you. But the cat, the cat eventually will get
Yeah.
hungry and start eating.
Yeah. That. Yeah. That's definitely great. That's interesting too. Something you think means something to you that like means something totally different to them. For example, for years, dogs or cats, I thought that when you pet them and show them love, that they're thinking, yeah, but that gets them overexcited and they go do bad things. They get aggressive. And it took me a while to realize, hey, listen, if I'm calm, they're calm. But if I start that, hey, you big baby, it's like, oh no.
I have the same problem with my wife. It's a joke.
Doctor, how did you get interested in the paranormal?
Well, I was actually I was in. Have you ever seen a movie called a TV series called Mysterious Places, something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on. Yeah, I love that show, and Unexplained and Mysterious Places. So I was watching that show, and I decided the show wasn't enough. They needed to, they show you a place, but it's not enough. So I decided they needed to have a tour. So you go to these places. So I called the guy up. He was in London, a producer, and I said, "You guys should do this."
Yeah.
And he said, "We have enough trouble just getting our show out." He said, "We're fully booked up." He said, "But we love the idea. If you wanted to do this, we would promote it on the show." So I said,
Wow.
"Okay." So I started doing this was during COVID. I started researching mysterious places, and I mysterious places in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Hawaii. I did a bunch of things, and in the process of looking at the mysterious places, it turns out a lot of lost and mysterious places are ghost places.
Yeah.
And I found that the ghost places were more interesting than the places that were just lost and mysterious because time had gone by. So I stopped working on the lost and mysterious places. I gave up the idea of tours with the TV show, and I just started working on the ghost book. So I really stumbled into it by accident.
Okay. Okay.
Fun.
And Zandine, here's one for you. That mansion that you were talking about, was it the Westerfeld house?
That's it.
And that's it? Yeah. Because they would have a satanic rituals that was performed in there. And I
Oh, that's
guess
that's right. That's a lot of houses in San Francisco. I mean, there's ley lines before the house is even built. That's another story, though.
Yeah, there's several Victorian places that have ghosts. Some of them people were killed there. Some of them, yeah.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
a there's a there's a there's a house there. I'm gonna forget the guy's name, but during the Civil War, or after the Civil War, he let black people stay in the basement because even though the Civil War was over and the 13th Amendment, et cetera, black people still had a tough time in parts of San Francisco.
Yeah,
So he used to kind of let them
stay
stay, and
there.
then he got killed in a duel, and they locked the basement or something like that. And so to this day, there are the ghosts of the black people who had been in the basement are still hanging around.
You know what I think that I wonder is so I used to go to a church called Macedonia, which was on it was one block up from Fimo was like Visitor, Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church. I have to look it up, but actually, it was a big, large basement. Like this is like pretty much one of the biggest churches. There's Third Baptist, there's other big buildings, edifices, but this one, I mean, in the basement was so vast, and everybody used to be scared of it. They talk about everything that would happen down there, and but they cleaned it out like years when I got older, but it was like a really. I wonder if that had anything to do with it because
There is
it's not
another
many places.
basement in a church that was used in the 1920s by the Chinese. The Chinese were taking women over from China, young girls, and turning them into prostitutes. And there was a woman who had a like a safe house for Chinese girls, and she used to keep them in the basement so these the sex traffickers couldn't get them. Well, the sex traffickers were all upset, and they went after the woman and they burned the house, and all the girls in the basement died. And there were supposedly the ghosts of the girls still in that, and that was a church. It was the basement of a church. And she
Okay,
had like
yeah,
the school next door. Maybe that same church. And I, off the top of my head, I wrote so many damn books. I can remember it, but I can't remember her name or the name of the church. But there is a church basement where these Chinese girls died, which
you know what? I think I remember here. You know what? It would be so ironic, but that church I went to up until I went to St. Dominic's middle just first to sixth grade, which is right on the corner. But I was actually a Baptist, so on Sundays, and that was like my church home, Macedonia, which is so one was by Steiner and Pine. We're all like one block off of Fillmore. So I just remember, I'm not McAllister. Anyway, like I said, this was the biggest church, pretty much that you would find, but the basement was vast. It was like, I mean, the Cow Palace and stuff like that was big, but that was like that was a whole nother thing. But we're talking about a building, and it was a church. And when you go downstairs, our Sunday school teacher, Mr. Fields, would say, "Don't go down there," and they would get mad too. But kids would want to go down there and like,
yeah,
play hide and seek or do whatever.
sure.
I wonder that would be ironic though. It's so just for the record, if you remember, it's called Macedonia Baptist Church, and it's still there. I don't know that the street will come up because it's been there for a long time. It's old.
I can't I can't I can't even remember her name. She had a name.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
I hate
too many,
that when you.
too many names and places.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway,
we're almost close to the hour. I just gotta ask, Zending, did you go inside the Westerfeld mansion or house?
nah, just been around and right on the corner, all around. Never been actually inside. But like I said, I
Okay.
lived directly across from it and never really knew that about it because it's at the top of the hill, at the top of the hill, the corner, and I lived at the bottom of the hill on the other side. It's called Leslie Apartments. Me and my mom stayed there for a while. So
I never knew that about you. And then my former employee, Melanie Huter, was friends with the owner of that house, and he was saying that Anton LaVey was doing rituals in that house from the Church of Satan. Yeah, so I've walked past it. I never went inside of it. Oh, okay. I'm just getting a word here. Last of the questions. We're at the hour. So thank you so much. How can people get a hold of you, Doctor? Do you have a website? Or where can they get
No,
your books?
they can email me at Dr. J. Gardner, Drj Gardner at gmail.com.
okay, okay.
And the books, can we get them at Amazon?
Yeah, they're all up on Amazon.
They are.
Um,
They are.
yeah, like I said, there's other. That's my biggest group. I have a ghost group. There's a whole bunch of other books up there too.
Well, good
Fantastic.
luck on that. Look, we look forward to your endeavors on the Ghost and in Panama City, and things that you're doing with that. I look forward to that.
Yeah, but this is going to be my best book yet. I've spent a lot of time on this, and I'm going to go down there and yeah, this will be the best one. But
And,
All right.
and he's throwing my story into his book, so I'm
yeah,
excited.
four of your ghosts are in there.
Cool.
Hey, yeah, that's pretty big time, man. Hey,
Yeah.
well,
Hey.
it's not right all the time, but that's cool, man. Doctor, man, you gave us a lot of information. You know, it's cool to just hear you talk about what you do because you end up giving us other things, little nuggets we didn't plan on getting. So, thanks
Oh,
for that. Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor, for being on the show. It was great. Nice seeing you, Zandine. So, yeah, we got some good information out there. Thank you very much.
Thank
All
you,
right.
my pleasure.
All right, Jim. Do
Okay.
it again.
Good night now.
Let's do it again.